I just want to put things in context for your viewers. Out of the 60 million eligible Iranian voters, less than 60%, essentially, I mean, around 60% did not vote. Only 16 million of this population voted for Pezeshkian. And this, with the voter turnout of 49.8, it still was one of the lowest turnouts. And that tells us that the Iranian public is extremely disillusioned toward the regime, toward the system. You know, Beverley, when I was growing up in Iran, and I also covered multiple presidential elections in Iran, there has always been a time when people, despite their disbelief and disillusionment in the Islamic Republic, still went out and voted for the reformist candidate, for candidates that they said are the lesser evil. Okay, but then again, in this case, we saw a minority of that population follow that pursuit because the level of apathy and disillusionment is so high. So for those who voted for Pezeshkian, it was once again the choice between bad and worse. But in this case, that population is smaller than ever.
Yeah, and so to your point, not much of a mandate, but he's pledged this reformist agenda. But what does that actually mean in today's Iran? Is he still very much part of the inner circle?
Absolutely. I want your viewers and colleagues ask two questions, and that is, when you have a candidate who in the previous presidential election has been disqualified, why is he now suddenly qualified, right? And also, what does the illusion of a fair and balanced election provide the Islamic regime? And that is legitimacy, right? And that is something, if you talk to ordinary Iranians, they don't believe that a candidate as such has a lot of power, but more so, as we have been hearing, is that this has been part of a so-called circus election. Now, some people would say, you know what, the Iranian economy is in such shambles that an inch of reform, that an inch of progress and change would be beneficial to people. And yes, that is true. Iranian people are suffering financially. They are under severe social political constraints, and they are desperate, right, for that inch of change. So if Pezeshkian brings in a set of social, but mainly financial reform, that means something to the Iranian people. But please bear in mind that he is part of the system. He's part of the apparatus, because otherwise he would have not been qualified. He would have not been allowed participation. Another thing, Beverley, if I may say, is that when you talk to ordinary Iranians in Iran, they know that real people, real individuals with patriotic beliefs, those who really believe in fundamental change, are not allowed participation, are not given the opportunity to participate. And the last bit on Pezeshkian's promises is that if we listen carefully to his campaign, he really didn't promise anything profound. And that showed us that he understands that he cannot overpromise, because he knows that he will most certainly underdeliver.
Not be allowed to deliver, as you point out.
Exactly.
I mean, what has been, I'm sure, so heartbreaking for you is to watch the rights of women be so eroded. Is there any chance that any of the hardline views on the role of women in Iran might be softened with him?
You know, what I find fascinating looking at Pezeshkian's campaign very closely is that he seems to be working with all sides, and that was what he was campaigning, right? So the idea of him being able to work with the IRGC, right? These are forces that vehemently stifle any form of dissent and protest. These are the powers essentially behind the morality police, right? So if he has some way to work with these hardline conservative forces, then naturally that's going to be to the benefit of any form of social reform. But when it comes to the hijab, when it comes to the mandatory regulations of compulsory headscarf, again, Beverley, these are rooted in the principles of the Islamic regime. Now, suddenly, listen, the supreme leader and the powers be may say, you know what, this is detrimental to our longevity. this is detrimental to our existence. So let's soften things. But I will add, Masoud Pezeshkian would not be given the opportunity to run and essentially be elected had there not been for the blessing of the supreme leader.
Yeah, and that's what's so fascinating by the fact he was allowed to be elected, to use those terms, given the role Iran is taking on the Israel-Gaza conflict, given the fact that they really need to reset relations with the US and try and re-engage on the nuclear deal that fell away.
Mm-hmm. Again, both points that you mentioned, Iran's policies in the regional sphere of influence, as well as the nuclear file, run directly at the behest of the Supreme Leader and the National Security Council, and the presidency and his office has very little to do with it. So again, historically, the Supreme Leader gives his blessing to whatever administration to pursue his lines and his policies. Now, I'm very much keen to see who will become the next U.S. president election, because if we think about, the Obama versus Rouhani sort of pragmatic, quote unquote, reformist candidate, we saw engagement, right? We saw diplomacy, we saw JCPOA, and ultimately the removal of set of sanctions. I know we're not talking about that, but no. but for Iranian people, again, any opportunity for engagement with the world, any opportunity for the betterment of the disastrous financial conditions at home means something. So whether we're going to have a Trump-Pezeshkian calculus or whether we're going to have a Biden-Pezeshkian calculus is yet to be seen, but it matters. Iranian people are some of the most vibrant, educated people in that region, Beverley, and they want to belong to the world. They want to meet their potential, and their lack of participation showed us that they are apathetic, they're disillusioned, but they still don't want a regime and government of someone like Jalili, who really is in the words of people I speak with in Iran, is the Taliban-esque, conservative right-wing figures. They don't want that.
Really appreciate you giving us that wonderful perspective, Tara. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Beverley.